I see that we have 7 people present, so we can begin with public comment. Did we receive any public comment, Mr. McLaughlin? Mr. Cardona, did we receive any public comment?
To my knowledge, no, I did not receive any public comment.
Okay, then we're ready for the public meeting to discuss proposed tax rate for 2021.
Mr. Barton.
Yes, sir. I believe that Mr. Fernandez is going to set us up with a quick slideshow to lead us through this. And we do have 2 public hearings this evening. The first one is for the tax rate. The Texas Education Agency has advised us to use a voter approval rate, which is the new term for the rollback tax rate, based on a tier 1 rate of 91 cents and a tier 2 rate of 6 pennies. Together, that's a projected tax rate of 0.9764, which would be a decrease from the 99 cents it is this year in M&O. In debt service, we are looking to keep the same tax rate at 0.3239. Overall, again, our tax rate would fall by just over 1 penny. TEA plans to release the tier 1 rate that will apply to San Marcos CISD in August. And that rate will likely be lower than the one that we're projecting this evening.
Wow.
At this time, there is the opportunity provided for public comment. Usually those were sent to Mr. McLaughlin. I'm not sure if we have anybody who has received any public comment on this.
Hold on. Now I see Mr. McLaughlin has a phone, but he's the host, so he has to unmute himself.
All right. Okay. All right. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Sorry. I don't know why the app wasn't launching, so I had to. Anyway, I've received no emails from anyone with a public comment or noting that they would wish to make a public comment.
Very well. Then we will move forward to the public hearing for the budget. This evening, we will propose a budget to the trustees. In the M&O fund, we project a revenue of $81,036,149 and expenditures of $82,427,110. That's a deficit of $1,390,961. In food service, we project revenue of $5,054,975 and expenditures of $5,075. That's an excess of $54,900. And in debt service, we project revenue of $21,151,501. Expenditures for our bond payments of $17,303,185, with an additional $3,848,316 that we intend to use for defeasance. Mr. Fernandez will go to the next slide, but at this time, this is an opportunity for public comment.
Yeah, again, this is John McLaughlin, and I have received no request for public comment or public comments regarding this item.
That concludes our public hearings for budget and for tax rate.
Okay. So that takes us to Roman 5, consider approval of budget for 2020-21.
Yes, sir. Earlier today, I sent the board a hard copy of our budget document that we're proposing for approval. It is, after the season of budget workshops, it is the final version that includes the additional cost for insurance and the general pay increase that the trustees approved at our last meeting.
Mr. McLaughlin,
Yes, Mr. Redondo.
is now a time to ask questions about tax rate, budget, or how did you want to go about that?
Yeah, I think this is you mean trustee questions? Yeah, now's the perfect time.
Okay, perfect. Mr. Barton, if you can go back to the TEA recommended tax rate for the ISD, and when you say TEA has advised, okay, so they've told us that this is the tax rate we should be utilizing. Why is that their advisory opinion for the ISD?
Right now, it's because they haven't actually calculated the tax rate that they will want us to use. And that's based on the values statewide, the property values statewide, that are just now starting to collect that information. And they will tell us what our tax rate should be in August. This is the maximum that it could be.
Okay.
Without going to an election. Let me put that, we're
So
not trying.
if we tried to hold the tax rate as is, it would trigger an election.
Yes, sir.
What you're saying. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
My second question, Mr. McLaughlin, if no one else had anything, is in
Go ahead.
regards to food service. If we could go back to that slide when it comes to budget approval. So several years ago, I know we had a food service department that essentially served as like an enterprise fund. We spent significantly less than what revenue was generated based on meal reimbursements. And I know the board approved the community eligibility grant. Now I think we're going on our second year having that throughout the district. And as an individual trustee, I would be interested in seeing, I guess, costs over time when it comes to food service operations, staffing, salaries, benefits, costs to provide meals for ISD students, so on and so forth. I know during our budget formation process, anecdotally, I had conversations with, I think, Superintendent Cardona, Board President McLaughlin, and Mr. Barton, and the food service department was, not, I guess, generating the funds that it had historically done for a number of reasons. And I just want to become more aware and cognizant of what's changed over time. I know there were a couple of years when I was first elected to the board when we essentially had to spend money in food service balance because it was growing so much. And that's, I think that was like TEA's recommendation at the time. So I would be very interested, and I'm very curious to see what's changed historically over the past few years, because I don't know. And then secondly, and this has come out of the COVID-19, I guess, crisis, when our director of food service had said, there were issues with supply and our vendors and things like that. I hope, and individually, just to be transparent, I hope that my questions and the information provided by staff affords us the opportunity to discuss where we get our products and what vendors we utilize. I would be interested individually to see us source as much from our food service as possible through local, meat markets and produce outlets and whatever that looks like, local farms, regional farms. But that's a big aside, but I just kind of wanted to be transparent about where I look to kind of take this conversation long-term. But since food service was there and it regards the budget, I thought I would just dump all of that in all y'all's lap so you knew where I was coming from. But anyway, so that's a separate request outside of the budget, but since we're talking about it, I wanted to make our board president and superintendent and our CFO aware of that. So thanks, and that's all I got for this.
Yes, sir.
Okay, do we have any other questions or comments from trustees?
I have one. It's
Okay, go
Ann.
ahead, Ms. Halsey.
I am wondering if we used the $3,848,316 that we're marking here for a defeasance payment. If we instead, could we use that to reduce the tax rate any further? And if so, how much?
In the INS budget, that can be used, and I believe it's 3 pennies it could go down. Again, that would only count for debt service. And that would mean we can't do any of the defeasance and likely not the bond refunding that we were able to do this year.
So, I mean, we've already done the ones for this year. That's already been booked. The defeasance
Correct.
payment. Yeah. So what are you projecting that we would be eligible for next year? And what's the basis of the recommendation that we do the defeasance rather than reduce the tax rate?
I honestly, it's a standard practice of San Marcos that mirrors what was in the budget this year. And we've consistently done defeasance to reduce our debt within the district and to make sure that we're always, we have room in the INS and debt service account if needed.
I understand that that's what we've done before. I'm just thinking that now that we're entering into a very unknown situation, whether there might be a good argument for reducing the taxpayer burden, given the uncertainty of the economy for our local citizens and the fact that it seems unlikely interest rates are going to increase significantly in the next year, but it does seem likely that our state budget is going to be cut further. I don't know. I'm just sort of talking this through and would wonder what my colleagues think about it.
John, I'm raising my hand. I don't know if you can see the little tab or not. But
I was just so everybody knows before you carry forward, Mr. Arredondo. So I wasn't able to get on the app, and so I'm in my browser. I can see, and I'm using my phone, so I can hear y'all, but I can't see the functions of hand raising. So I'm just going to have to kind of hear you out loud. So yes, go ahead, Mr. Arredondo.
okay, cool. I just didn't want to be like yelling out or not using my hand or whatever. Okay, cool. So I would be supportive to continue this conversation that Trustee Halsey has now brought forward. However, I will admit that personally, I would want to contact the city of San Marcos and get some type of memorandum of understanding from them that they were not going to move forward with increasing their tax rate. Because if they're increasing theirs and we are lowering ours, then the burden from the taxpayer is a wash, essentially. Not to say that I still wouldn't be interested, but if we're talking about doing this for the reasons that Ms. Halsey enumerated, I'm in agreement with her. I would just hope that all jurisdictions that we represent would be on the same page. And so I know that was something that I've seen discussed by our San Marcos City Council. So that's, again, another variable as we talk about possibly lowering our tax rate as much as we can, is that there are currently other governmental jurisdictions who could possibly increase the tax rate based on the financial outlook that they're forecasting. So just food for thought as we have this conversation.
Mr. McLaughlin?
Mr. Bar. Yes, go ahead.
It's me, Lupe. I wasn't sure.
Yes, Ms.
I know
Piscina,
you
go ahead.
cannot see. I can see you, but you cannot see, right?
I
Okay.
can't see y'all, but I can hear you, yes.
So I would like for Mr. Barton to verbalize the advantage of using how we have done that diffusions monies. Could you please give us an update on that or just outline that for us, Mr. Barton?
In the debt service fund, when we are able to provide for defeasance on our debt, we reduce the debt to the district. And in the long run, that reduces the INS tax obligation to taxpayers. Right now, it's holding steady. And to answer what I think might be one of Ms. Halsey's concerns is when we do get our eventual tax rate, that is going to drop several cents. So I do think you are going to see that our tax rate will go down more than it is right now on the M&O side specifically, because that's the function of MB3, House Bill 3. But paying down the debt consistently, if we were to need to go to a bond in the future, would allow us to not have to raise the tax rate on taxpayers to do that. And that's why it's really important to pay that down.
So in actuality, there is a benefit to the taxpayer, maybe not so much in lowering the tax rate from the school district perspective, but there is a benefit to the taxpayer. Is that what I'm hearing you tell me? No,
Yes,
yes.
ma'am, in the long run, and
In the long
especially
run.
this year, as House
Right.
Bill 3 compresses our M&O rate, we're able to keep our tax rate the same and or better. And on the INS side, keep it the same and pay down debt.
Thank you.
Mr. McLaughlin, it's Ms. Halsey again. So are we set on to vote on the tax rate in August then, once we get the new number from TA? So tonight we're just having a hearing on it?
Yes, ma'am. The hearing was for anyone to voice their opinion, and these are all great questions. We won't vote on the tax rate till August, and if trustees voted something different than we had projected here, we would do a budget amendment to change that projected revenue.
Because I've agreed with the defeasance payments, and I think that's, you know, a smart budget management tool that we have employed. It also, as far as I understand, right, it gives us room then to go out for bonds for additional construction projects when we do the defeasance payments, correct?
That is correct, and that's not something we're looking at right now, but years
Right.
from now, that could be very beneficial.
Years from now, certainly. I'm looking forward though at the next year and the year after that, and what money is going to be available to us from the Texas State Legislature and the pressures that are going to be on our local citizens, and wondering, like, short-term versus long-term, if the short-term tax break for people might be better, since we don't have a major construction project that we have to complete next year. But
It's a great conversation.
can you take Mr. Arredondo's question to the city management and find out about what arrangements could be made so that we don't unintentionally create some sort of seesaw were we to decrease the tax payment?
We can certainly ask, and I'm curious what the superintendent might think about that, so I don't want to overstep my bounds, but I'm sure the city council would not, or nobody at the city would bind the hands of their council either. So I'm not sure we could get an agreement out of them
Right.
prior to them making a decision.
I can reach out to the city manager to see if he can broach the topic.
So I haven't weighed in on this particular topic, but in past years, I have voted against keeping an INS rate constant when we have the opportunity to reduce it, and that continues to be my position. So I'm very encouraged by Ms. Halsey's questions, Mr. Arredondo sharing that broad goal of providing some tax relief. I think as a taxpayer myself, and as I hear from citizens, any bit is going to help, and us keeping money that we don't have a specific need for because we might want to defease our debt for like the 6th time since I've been on the dais is not a reason to not lower the rate right now. So I know we don't vote on that tonight, but just so everyone is real clear where at least I am individually.
And Mr. McLaughlin, my last comment on this topic. First and foremost, Mr. Barton and our finance department, thank you so much for bringing this today. Obviously, we have several weeks and months to continue these conversations and dialogues. And I think to Mr. McLaughlin's point and Trustee Halsey's point, we're going to have to see kind of where everyone else is. I agree that any type of tax relief in this uncertain economic climate will be much appreciated and welcomed by the citizenry. But I will admit that this has been historically what the board has voted on and supported of the defeasance and holding the INS rate as is. So thank you for bringing that to us as it's historically been brought to the board. But given all the things that are going on, there might be some opportunity to look at a different course of action, at least this year.
So if we,
Mr. McLaughlin, Go ahead, Clem, go ahead.
So if we approve the budget tonight, how would the defeasance or change in tax rate be affecting our budget that we're going to approve tonight?
The budget, it won't change anything about tonight. In a few moments, when the trustees are ready, you'll vote on this budget. And then in August, when we approve a tax rate, if the tax rate you approve for debt service doesn't sustain the budget that we have here, the revenue, it has to at least meet our obligation payments for next year. But if it doesn't sustain the revenue that we have there, we will bring you a budget amendment to reduce that revenue.
Okay.
We have not, Mr. Barton, we have not traditionally had budget amendments for changes in the INS budget. In my recollection, we voted for a budget on M&O, which I think is what's proposed tonight. And what we've done with regard to we've certainly recognized savings at various times from defeasance and other things, but that's not a part of our M&O budget, is it?
You approved 3 budgets this evening, sir. The 199 are total. That's the M&O budget. The food service and debt service on your sheet.
So can we collectively motion those, or you want them one by one?
Just one. The way it is written on the administrative item I sent you today, it just recommends that it is recommended the board adopt the 2021 proposed budgets for general fund, food service fund, and debt service fund.
But is there a reason that we couldn't hold off on the debt service budget until we know the actual numbers?
Yes, ma'am. We need to approve our budget by the end of this month, and we will not know our tax rate numbers until August. We won't approve our tax rate numbers until August.
We have to approve it by the end of this month according to the state?
Yes, ma'am. We are required to approve our budget in June.
All 3 of them. Got it.
Mr. McLaughlin? Hello?
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead, Ms. Castillo.
Going back to, I am not opposed to using that 3.8 million for the purpose of reducing the tax burden. I just feel that whatever the city decides to do on their part, I think it's their decision. Whether it ups it or whatever it does, at least from the perspective of the school district, maybe it might be something that we're doing. I have been asked by some individuals that are looking at the tax burden on them, that if there's any way, and I think I shared this with Mr. Barton, that some individuals, business individuals were wanting to see whether the school would consider using last year's valuations for tax purposes on their properties or on their business. And I think Mr. Barton explained to me how that works. But I just say that in regards to, I think it's a good thing to do to help out the burden, especially during these times. I just don't think that whatever the city does, I just don't feel we should be dependent on whatever the city does. The city's going to do whatever they feel they need to do in order to collect their monies of whatever they want for a budget. So, you know, I just wanted to share that with you all, that for me, that's not going to be an important issue. I realize that, you know, we go down, they go up, but really is the cost to the or the savings to our taxpayers. But I think in the long term, it's coming from us as to what we're thinking about our own taxpayers from the perspective of the school district, who has always been the highest taxing entity in regards to, in comparison to the city and the county. Just wanted to add that.
Yeah, and just as a follow-up, I agree. I guess my comments about the city wasn't, one, to respond to Mr. Barton, was not to tie the hands of the city of San Marcos or say, because we're doing something, you do something, or vice versa. It was just to acknowledge that we could lower the tax rate on our end, not pay down debt, and just be cognizant that the city of San Marcos is looking at raising taxes on their end. So don't everyone go home thinking we did some great thing, because our taxpayers might not even see that significant of a decrease. So that was really more of just an informational piece and if we could cajole our, other electeds at City Hall to join us in these efforts to relieve the burden on taxpayers, that'd be great. But that's a whole other barrel of monkeys. So thank you.
Okay, does someone have a motion?
I'll make that motion. That we approve the 2021 budget as presented by administration.
I'll second.
Okay, motion by Cantu, second by Arredondo. I'm gonna roll call this because I can't see anybody, so sorry about that, guys. But Ms. Halsey?
Oh,
I'm sorry?
Anne was muted when
Was
she
it-
answered.
Oh,
Yes.
okay. Yes, okay. Ms. Hanson?
no,
Okay, Ms. Costilla?
Yes.
Mr. Arredondo?
Yes.
Ms. Cantu?
Yes.
Ms. Villapando?
yes,
And I am yes as well. So that carries 6-1 and takes us into, let me get back to the agenda.
Agenda prep.
Yes, we're down to Mr. Superintendent. You've circulated an agenda. Do you have anything we need to discuss on it?
Really, I know there's going to be some questions about House Bill 3, Item 6C. We'll have our typical academic update, our construction update. The new thing is Item C, House Bill 3, Board Goals. Dr. Ruiz Mills and Laura Hernsberger have been working on setting kind of a 4-year plan that's mandated by House Bill 3 that kind of gives us our goals. And I can let Dr. Ruiz Mills talk a little bit about that while I mute myself.
Yes, so House Bill 3 stated that we needed to come up with academic goals and specifically look at domain 3, closing the gaps. And so we've taken that information and following the guidance of House Bill 3, we were told not to increase the percentages over the course of the next 4 years, but to increase them by 1 to 3% every year until we're at the specific target given required by ESSA or the federal government and TEA for closing the gaps domain 3. Also, House Bill 3 says that the school board must receive training. The Lone Star governance training that we did back in September actually counts towards the goal setting. As you recall, we did spend some time establishing goals when we broke up into those groups. And so we just went based off of that information. And we'll have a presentation for you at the June board meeting.
Okay, thanks. I have a question. This is John. I have a question on 8B. Can someone speak as to what that is?
That is a community member whose mortgage company overestimated the taxes they were to pay. If I understand that right, Mr. Barton can jump in. And so she is wanting, I want to say it's somewhere around the neighborhood of $100. So she won, but because her mortgage company or something messed up, she didn't feel like she should get that money back. And Mr. Barton can speak.
We're not necessarily privy to the full story, but there's a request for waiver of penalties and interest, and I'll include that form in your board book. But the scenario that applies to the situation, she tells us, is a mortgage company error. And so we are the taxing entity, so we have to vote if we're going to reimburse that money. And again, it is, I believe it's $143.
Is this for executive session?
Okay.
Is that item for executive session?
No, sir.
No.
So the mortgage company made a mistake and we're paying somebody back?
I'm going to go ahead and just read to you from the document from the request document. It says the property for which the tax is owed is subject to a mortgage that does not require the owner of the property to fund an escrow account for the payment of property taxes. The tax bill was sent to the mortgagee who failed to mail a copy of the bill to the owner of the property as required by section 31.01. I don't know the scenario in this taxpayer's life that brought her to this moment, but it was submitted to both us and the city for the different parts of the tax that could be reimbursed. And if you want more information, I can ask her for it.
I mean, so this is like a citizen who emailed us and cited some things, and now we might be giving them money. I guess I would want more information and even some guidance from legal counsel about how this works. Because even in the communication that Mr. Barton just recited from, he said, I guess the mortgagee is the one who failed to send the email, unless the ISD is the mortgagee. I don't know how it's come to us as an issue. But again, I would just want more information by our meeting to know what I would need to do or how I would need to vote or why it's even coming to us in the first place. So good opportunity to have this during agenda prep to let you know what I'm going to be asking for or curious about.
Perhaps we can ask our legal counsel to put together a little memo just on referencing this. But it's not a direct email to the district. It's literally.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want like our legal expenses to be more than the money that we give her for $140. I've never seen this before in my 5 years on the school board of where we're paying somebody back for taxes and penalties and something like that. So I would like some more information.
It's a request that they made through the Hayes County Tax Office. So it's on an official request form. It's not just an email to us.
And so administratively, you aren't in a position to deny requests for refund?
No, sir. It's actually, it is cited on the agenda item 33.011K. You guys have that authority.
Okay. Story doesn't make any sense too. I mean, you send the taxing authority sends the tax bill to the homeowner.
To the mortgage company.
And no, I don't get it from my mortgage company. I get it from the county. I don't rely on my mortgage company to say, oh, hey, your taxes are due.
But their taxes are paid to the mortgage.
No, that's not what Mr. Barton said. He said that they're not escrowed.
Oh, okay. It's not part of the escrow. I misunderstood then.
Yeah.
So admittingly, this is new to me. I'm very interested, curious. If we owe some money, let's talk about it at our June meeting. But obviously, I would like some more information. Or is this, I understand that it's coming from the Central Appraisal District office, but is it the appraisal district saying, San Marcos CISD, you owe this person some money? Or did they just go through the Central Appraisal District's process to request the taxing entity to give certain amount of money? So again, I don't need that answer tonight. I don't want to beat this horse to death. I know Trustee Costilla is trying to get somewhere by 6, but again, can of worms of questions because of this agenda item. So I'd be very interested in learning more about it by the June regular board meeting.
Mr.
I have a
Barton,
question.
Mr. Barton,
Go ahead, Ms. Castillo.
maybe the appraisal district might be able to help us out rather than going through legal counsel, because if it's going to cost us more than $143, it's not cost effective. Maybe they could answer some questions for us, since it's never been brought to our, since I've been on the board, I've never seen this before, anything like this. So maybe they can answer some questions for us. I don't want to take a lot of your time for this purpose, but at the same time, maybe it might be better than going through our own legal counsel and having them research and come back with a $300 bill, you know, that maybe it's double the amount of what we're supposed to pay her back. My suggestion, that's all. Thank you.
Okay.
I have a question. Can you hear me?
Ms. Hampton. Yes, go ahead,
Yeah.
Ms. Hampton.
My understanding, looking at this without seeing everything, is she paid her taxes late. That's why she incurred penalties and interest. So I'd like to know, why she paid her taxes late, because yes, the tax bill goes to the owner, and then if you have it, escrow, then a copy would also go to your escrow, to your company. So I'd be curious to hear all of that, see all that information, and not take it to our legal counsel if we just don't have to.
I've already spoken
Okay.
with her just to make sure she understands that some of this information, her form specifically, will be in our board book and publicly, it'll be publicly available. So I can call her and ask her for just a written statement of what occurred so that you guys can read it.
Sounds perfect.
Okay. I think that's fine. I agree with my colleagues. I don't think we need to run up the meter. Lawyers. All right. Are there other, well, I have one item that was on last month, and then I'll circle through everyone to see if there's additional items we want to discuss putting on the agenda. But Mr. Superintendent, I have some questions with regard to facility usage during the during COVID. Specifically, I know that the district locked the Hernandez field, which has traditionally been open and which was paid for, or the track there was paid for by community members who now can't use it. So last month I had thrown something on really late about facilities, and that's generally within the province of the administration. I just wanted to know if you had a plan on reopening that track, or if this was a permanent move.
It was a temporary move based on something that was happening when we were in a lockdown phase and the city has closed all the parks. Really, it occurred because somebody, and I talked to that somebody already, and he posted some stuff on Facebook about, hey, come join me with my dogs out at Hernandez, and really was becoming an issue. And the principal brought it to our attention and said, hey, we're locked. We have all our facilities locked down, but this guy's posting stuff on Facebook to come have a laying out party at the track. And I get it that the community helped pay for it, but we shut it down. And then, we're going to have to change the way our facilities are used in the future. So, I've been talking to Mr. Wozniak and Mr. Barton about when we return, about how that looks. Because if we're going to require people to come in and check in and get screened for COVID when we return, then we're going to ask our community members, if they're using facilities, to come to the front office and check in, make sure that, none of them are ill. So it's going to be a change in practice for everybody. And so, I was just closed for that particular, because the principal actually asked us, hey, there's an issue and it's making me uncomfortable, and can you just take care of it?
Okay, well, if that's a temporary thing, I don't need to put anything on the agenda, but I would like, and I know that we've got a new hire that's also focused on facilities, but I think a broader facilities plan that we could have some input on in a workshop would be great, so that people know when particular facilities are open. We can deal with dog issues, because I understand it's not usually people we have the issue with, but it's dogs and people not cleaning up after the dogs that are damaging some of our expensive facilities. So I would be open to that later, but I know you got things maybe in front of that, but maybe in the fall.
It'll be a part of that, like when we reopen, like what our facilities do look like. I was up at the high school last week, and there are a ton of community members using that track and field already, and we just ask them to make sure they keep everything clean and sanitized and clean up after themselves. And they do a good job of that. But in this case, it was, I think, trying to have a party on our campus, and it was like, no, just keep you and your dogs away for right now. And we'll figure out something.
Thanks for that. I had one more item for the trustees. We traditionally, my first 4 years we had, my first 3 years, we had officer elections in May. And then last year, I think we had it in June, and we rolled it back with some discussion about, the new trustee. And this year, this is June, the June meeting. So we certainly could have officer elections, and that's great. I know I talked to a couple of trustees, but not a quorum, in order to get a feel for where this was. And there was some discussion about maybe after our election for the 2 seats that are on the ballot would be a more appropriate time. But I am open to putting that on in June, if anybody has an interest in doing that.
So I'll go first. John, admittingly, we had communicated about this beforehand, and I had expressed kind of my indifference, or, have it in June, have it in, November after the new trustee, whatever that looks like, are seated. I'm fine keeping it in June and having it on this agenda just so that it stays congruent with our board operating procedures. Or I guess hypothetically, if we decided to move it to November, it still stay on as an agenda item, but we vote as a board communicating the intent of moving the elections to after the November general election, just so that, we publicly postpone the May election by a vote of the board, and we, move our elections similarly, rather than doing one and then the other kind of separate. But that's just me, but I could go with whatever.
Do any colleagues have a strong opinion? Not that that was weak, but they feel one way or the other.
Yeah, I understood what you meant.
John,
Yes.
I would like to say my opinion.
Okay, go ahead, Ms. Vivano.
I think we should keep it in June just because that's the way it is. I don't, we have to wait till November, and then after that, to have elections just kind of throws everything off. Everybody who's interested and needs to be prepared, and we need to have an agenda item for our June meeting to have officer elections. I believe that.
Okay, that's good enough for me. Mr. Cardona, if you can put officer elections on the June agenda, and then if a majority of I'm not suggesting this, but if a majority of the trustees want to table it, or, we can certainly do that. But I think we need to have it on there as a placeholder, because that's what we do. And we just moved it to June and made a big deal of it last year. So I certainly don't want to leave it off.
Here.
All right. Does anybody else have a
Yeah, Mr. McLaughlin?
sorry. Yes, did I talk over someone? Ms. Costilla?
Yes, I think we need to traditionally, we have not had we had a agenda prep meeting in July. I know that we have a meeting and with the holiday, but I would like for us to go ahead and do that if we possibly can. And also, I think I talked to you before about having a discussion regarding maybe even a workshop regarding reopening the status of the campuses. I get questions asked about, are we going back the same way or are we not? And I think it would be good for us to get an update. Maybe the administration can do that for us sometime in July.
The administration, or Mr. Cardona, obviously those plans are fluid at the moment, and he suggested that July would be a better time frame. So I think we can keep the July agenda prep, which I think would be set for the 6th.
John,
I have a comment too.
I have a
All
question.
right, go ahead. Okay, I heard Arredondo, Halsey, Hanson. Go ahead, Mr. Arredondo.
Okay, so Georgianne sent us an email before the board meeting about possibly nominating a candidate for the TASB board. And I'm just going to do this for the purposes of transparency, because I've seen her in action when we go to MASBA or TASB conferences. Mrs. Villapando, would you be interested in being nominated to serve on the TASB board? I believe you have in the past, but you just overwhelmingly ran unopposed for another term on the board. So I think you have San Marcos's support to serve in that type of capacity. I don't know if you have interest in serving, but I just wanted to ask.
Yeah, that's a major undertaking. And I would love to, but we have a current member who is going to run for re-election. And what happens at TASB, normally the person who is in there serving already, the majority kind of, well, you have to go by the votes that they get in from each school district.
Yeah.
In the region.
Absolutely. Well, it was just something I wanted to ask. Again, I know you're very popular and very liked at these conferences, and I think you would do a phenomenal job, and you would support the ISD well. Similarly, I think our friends in Del Valley and Hayes CISD would also support you. You look like our communities that we serve more than maybe the current TASB delegate, in my opinion, but that's just me. But anyway, just something, food for thought to consider. If you're interested in it, I would be glad to put that on the June agenda, because I think Georgianne needs that information by the end of the month. If you could.
It can be up for discussion. The current TASB member is running for re-election, and so she has sent us a request.
Yeah.
And so it can be on the June agenda, and let me see what I think about it.
All right.
Let me give some thought.
All right.
And just one more piece. Obviously, I think we would have to amend some things because we had like defunded board travel or some other things. But if Mrs. Villalpando got the position, which I have no doubt she would, then we would obviously allocate funds to make sure that she could go to all the necessary. I don't even know what that would look like in COVID, but I'm just saying it might be something we have to take up at a future meeting as well if she's going to
I'll
the
find out what
delegate conventions or whatever that looks like. But anyway.
I'll find out what the commitment is, and I'll let you know. But that's definitely something that we could need to think about, because we don't have funds to really fund a lot of things.
I'll saw some.
Yeah, well, we'll have
some
at least one new trustee this year, so we may have to revisit that freeze we did last year on travel and expenses.
Yeah.
Ms. Halsey?
Thanks. I'm going back to Trustee Castillo's point about the plan for reopening the schools, and I noticed that there's an agenda item about the calendar, and I'm assuming that is going to make some proposed changes to the calendar in light of the COVID pandemic. I'm going to say it's going to be very difficult for me to vote on those without knowing sort of what the grander view is toward reopening. Not to say that we have to have a finalized plan by that time, but if there's a potential to see some drafts or some of the, these are the way that we're thinking about that would support the any potential calendar changes that will make it easier for me to vote.
Okay.
I think Kathy had something.
Yeah, I'm getting there. Ms. Hanson.
Yes, Mr. McLaughlin, I was looking at the superintendent's evaluation. Do you want to give us some direction on when you want our forms, or?
Sure. Would everybody be able to get those by the end of Sunday?
Yes.
By the end of a week from Sunday? Yeah, like the day before. That way I can put it together and we can go over it during the executive session. And I'll just block
Sunday,
off.
right?
Well, no, the sun. We're 2 weeks out, right? So
The day before.
the Sunday the 14th. I'll just block off some time on the morning of the 15th and put it all together.
Okay, then double yes. I thought you wanted it by the end of this week. So yeah, I can do 2
Yeah, you
weeks.
can send it if you want, but yeah.
Okay.
All right.
I have another.
Okay, Ms. Hanson, did you have
Sorry.
anything else?
No, that was it.
Okay.
Mr. McLaughlin?
I want to get,
Go ahead, Ms. Castillo.
I noticed the cybersecurity training that we talked about the last time. I'm getting that training at the university. Do I need to retake it again?
That is a question for Mr. Hubenek, I believe. I think our deadline's the 12th. If you haven't taken it yet, I'm planning
June
on
the
doing it this
14th.
week.
I gotta take it before June the
Okay.
14th.
Okay.
So maybe
if
I'll ask him, but that's fine.
If
Ms.
you send
Castillo?
him the information on the one you're doing, then maybe he can, cross them over, but I would just check with Greg.
Okay, thanks.
I have some information. I asked Mr. Hubenak, and he said, because I have taken it yearly at the state, and he said that he really needed us taking it for the district to be able to note that. But you can go ahead and contact him and see if that's
Okay.
changed. I
Thanks.
did both.
I want to ask a question since we're asking different kinds of questions now. This meeting that is taking place to start organizing and getting ready for reopening, when can we expect the report? And will it be ready by the July agenda prep?
We'll have parts of it ready, but again, there's no way we're going to have a complete picture of what reopening will look like. We've begun working on it. You have the coaches, fine arts, the principals, and the teams. And so we'll have, we can give you a little bit of what we have thus far. When Dr. Ruiz-Mills talks about the calendar options. But we're still kind of seeking, TA and CDC, all their stuff's all over the place. So we're trying to figure out, but Mr. Nevada's and Educational Technologies working with all the departments to create one central hub so that we have one document that encompasses the whole district on what a return will look like. But if you want a living, breathing document we may not even have it. We don't have budget sometimes till the day before. But we are trying to figure it out to get it out to the community as quick as possible. So I would say July 6th, you should get a really good skeleton view, like by department, by campus. But then they're still refining it because remember, they have to go back to their campus improvement teams and walk them through that and get approval for their new plans to incorporate all that. I can tell you the calendar, we're going to start on the 4th Monday of August because this district chose not to move to a district of innovation 3 years ago when it was proposed. And so we're kind of limited as to what we can do at this short notice. But it will include a pilot for 2 of our schools that tend to have some academic difficulties. And that's Mendez and Travis, looking at a pilot with TEA of extending the school year to 210 days. So a calendar that's 210 days as opposed to 180. But this next year is the planning year for those 2 schools to work on with their community on what that looks like. And then we would have to apply for some future funding that I think we get. The fact that we're one of 15 districts out of 1,200 that got the grant to look at alternative day school year says a lot because I think that recognized the work we did right now. But we'll have a plan for you. I wouldn't say it's going to be the finalized plan, but it'll be a plan.
Mr. McLaughlin.
Yes, Mr. Arredondo, go ahead.
Mrs. Cantu, you didn't have any other questions on that, did you? I'm sorry.
I'm good. Thank you, Mr. Cardona.
So Mrs. Costilla has made reference to it. I know I have some individual questions about reopening of the ISD. I don't know if to facilitate this and to limit the burden on staff of trying to bring a completed document or as complete as humanly possible to the board, because I understand that, in my opinion, due to a lack of leadership at every other level above us, the ISD is kind of on its own. If we have individual questions that community members have asked us, how many people are going to be on, how many students are going to be on the bus? Can we send those questions to you or to the superintendent so that at least staff has a draft working document of what that would look like? Because I think that is what I'm hearing the most is, are all 8,400 students going to go back the first day of school? That could be a big question mark right now, right? How many kids are going to be on a bus in the AM bus route for El Camino Real? I don't know. So, I don't know what will be easier for staff, but that was kind of the point of my comment is rather than saying, I want you to deliver a document that has all of these scenarios and questions answered, is it easier for me just to send in the 3 or 4 questions that I do have? I don't know.
Well, I think part of the problem is that people go to y'all and then absent any information, you don't know what to tell them. So what we're trying to do is come up with multiple scenarios of what school's going to look like. So let's say it's a traditional option, option A, where we come back all 8,400 kids, then we're going to have what the bus looks like, what the cafeteria looks like, what the school schedule looks like, what curriculum looks like, what teaching schedules look like, what HR looks like for that one scenario. Then we're going to have a blended learning approach, right? We're going to have, and part of this is just us letting us do our jobs to send a survey out to parents, like a thought exchange like we did, like, hey, what do you foresee the future, like, what do you want it to look like? So then we can develop patterns and themes to think around. So we're going to do a thought exchange with parents, teachers, even students to see if we can pick up on themes. So we'll have the option A, regular day, option B, blended model, option C, we don't come back at all, and then what it looks like for each department within the system. So that's what we're trying to build. So yes, to answer your question in short, if you have community members who have questions, have them email me, and then I will forward them to the appropriate team members so they can look at those questions and then work with that group to solve, to make sure that that's incorporated. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Mr. McLaughlin, I have a question. I have a question for Mr. So, Mr. Cardona, can you just clarify so I make sure I understood correctly? Did you say August 4th is going to be the proposed day to start school?
No, I said the 4th Monday of August.
The 4th Monday. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I thought you said August 4th. Thank you for
Yeah.
clarifying that. And I would also ask that you please consider sending another message out to the community from you, sort of about what's happening over the summer. I know that FAST Camp is slated to start soon, and I think it would be terrific if you provided the community an update on what's happening, how it's happening, the planning, the processing that's going in there, so that they're getting that information from a reliable source.
So to answer that question, yes, we're working on that. Coach Walsh actually has a plan, returned a plan, and he's working with Mr. Fernandez to develop a communications piece to that to get out to our parents. And so that also is going to be in that update. He's actually the first one to begin putting all this, what it looks like, how kids separate, how they do safe exercising and so forth. So he is stepping in the forefront of this to communicate with parents to bring them back. So yes, we'll get something out. And Andrew's helping me get a letter on a broader scope to the parents. I saw a colleague of mine up in North Dakota put out a really kind of end of year, beginning of next year letter that we're kind of looking at modeling after. This is really good.
That sounds great. Thank you.
Mr. McLaughlin.
Yeah, let me jump in and then I'll go to you, Mr. Cardona, before I forget my train of thought. Michael, I have 2 things, and Mr. Cardona, I have 2 things. First of all, and I think we can hold most of our let's return to school stuff until that agenda prep for July, where we can have this be something we discuss. That gives the administration some more time. And so breaking my own rule that I just said, Mr. Cardona, do you have any sense that we'll have additional testing capacity cover for when we return to school?
Testing capacity cover as far as what it looks like when adults and kids come back to test them, like to screen them?
Yeah, or when there's, especially with faculty, I'm concerned, and with, if we're going to really cycle that many, you don't have to answer that today, but that's something I'd really want to know at July agenda prep, is if you've had conversations with the epidemiologist at the county and whether we can have some dedicated testing capacity for COVID-19, because if we are going to try to bring back, something approaching 8,400 kids, to do so safely, we'd have to know who is sick.
Yeah, so Doug has been working with Hayes County and them, and so he's actually going to present, I forgot to say this, he's actually going to present the beginning of this in June. So I'm giving up at the June board meeting on my superintendent report so he can start reporting out, and then he's going to be a big part of the discussion in July. And then to answer your question, like Ms. Halsey asked about Fast Camp, there's a QR code that every teacher and so this is the pilot. Coach Walsh put in a QR code so that every day that a kid and a staff member comes up, they QR code and they log in at daily their symptoms, and they have to have that as their ticket in to say that they're free of any kind of symptoms to get into the Fast Camp. And so he's put that in, and you'll see that in his presentation. The end product that will be given to parents and staff is you have to do this. And so I think Doug and him have been already meeting and working on, well, do we do something similar with when we return to school for adults and students, like some kind of entry ticket? Does that make sense? Into school for those people that want to come back. I think the reality is we'll probably ask parents if they can keep their kids. We're going to have some parents and teachers that want to stay in a remote process, and so we have to plan for that already. And so
Okay.
yeah, so we're thinking of like a entry ticket to school.
Okay. Mr. Arredondo?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. McLaughlin. I just wanted to circle back to Mr. Cardona's comment. First and foremost, I appreciate your patience in working on the communication piece of this. Ms. Halsey's comment really kind of bore out why I hear from people. So, you know, student athletes have been getting information about going back to Fast Camp and things like that. And so parents of other students who aren't in athletics are like, well, if student athletes are going back, then, you know, what about us? And we haven't heard anything. And so obviously it's a tight-knit community, and you know how our community loves to communicate with each other very regularly. So again, just the more centralized communication that I as a board member can refer to, refer to the superintendent's letter. It talks about, you know, the ongoing plans for the ISD, all the different iterations of reopening in the fall, what that looks like. So that's the first thing. The second thing, to Mr. McLaughlin's comment, I understand that our contact right now is the epidemiologist at Hayes County. But there are, if I'm not mistaken, 5 other ISDs in the county, a majority of them larger than San Marcos. So obviously we're all going to be trying to get the same, you know, availability of testing and things like that. And so whatever support the administration needs, whatever support Mr. Wozniak needs to, you know, marshal these resources now, I would rather us be having that conversation today about acquiring testing from a third party or whatever that looks like, but obviously not a box of a bunch of nonsense that we've seen kind of happen in San Marcos recently. But all that to say is I just want to make sure that we're all 5 ISDs aren't all waiting for the county, and then we're all in queue together when it comes to trying to open up our schools, because obviously Hayes is going to need a lot more tests than we are, given that their school district is almost 3 times our size. So whatever support the administration needs for that on my end, please know that we all have it. And again, I'm with the understanding that TEA and CDC is kind of all over the place. I would rather the ISD lead from the front. And so whatever resources you need to do that, you can count on that from me. I think I had one more thing, but I forgot. If I remember before we adjourn, I'll try and speak up. But
This is Anne. I have something that follows what Mr. Arredondo just said, and that's that I would be fully supportive of contracting with a doctor or an epidemiologist to work specifically in consultation with our administration for the reasons Mr. Arredondo outlined, but also because, like, when you come forward with the plan, Mr. Cardona, and a QR code that we're going to use to screen students, I know that's sort of the process that we've been following based on the CDC recommendation with staff thus far. But I don't know that the CDC, if they have large data sets that demonstrate this is an effective way of screening large groups of people, including children, I'm gonna need to know that data, like, or at least the citation for it, or to have the physician that's recommending this course of action, because, my understanding is that children especially often carry the disease asymptomatically and spread it asymptomatically. So if we're asking teenagers to check off the box that they don't have any symptoms, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're not contagious and infecting people, right? So I'm gonna have lots of questions, and if we can make sure that we are using whatever medical advice we can get, that would be great.
Just as a follow-up to that, Ms. Halsey reminded me of what I was going to ask, is when it comes to information like that, San Marcos is unique in the sense that we do have a large population of underinsured families with limited access to healthcare services. So they're already at risk. That is out there that this public health crisis disproportionately impacts communities that look like ours. So I understand that TEA and the CDC are giving very one-size-fits-all solutions. And so our strategy to reopen might look very different from Westlake or Wimberley or whoever. So with all that being said, again, I just wanted to reiterate Ms. Halsey's point that if we need to temporarily allocate funds to, staff this thing or support what our staff is doing, because obviously the county is already occupied figuring out how to open up the tens of thousands of other things that are trying to open up, right? So whatever resources we need on our end to make sure that the needs of our community are uniquely captured in how we reopen. And this is something that President McLaughlin and I had talked about, was the kids who need to be in school the most, the kids who need to be in front of that instructor, that educational leader the most, are also the ones who are most at risk because their families are frontline workers or, all of the things. So again, I just want our plan to be as reflective of our community as possible. And if that requires additional resources, you have my support to open up the schools as soon as possible. And third point, is there really no way that we can open up before? I saw the one pager from TEA that essentially punishes you if you're not a district of innovation. It says, you have three options. It's your district of innovation. Yes, you can do it. Yes, you can do it. You're a year-round school. Yes, you can do it. Yes, you can do it. If you're none of those things, you're kind of SOL, which is unfortunate, because if we can safely reopen, the fourth Monday in August for me, I wish we could open up sooner if it was safer to do so earlier. So I don't know if there's a way we can ask TEA. I mean, we've seen the governor just do things to do them the last couple of months, and, Commissioner Rath similarly. So I don't know why there's only that one thing stopping us from being a district of innovation, why we couldn't call an earlier start of school. But that's just me personally.
Okay. Do any other trustees have anything on this agenda prep piece for the June agenda before we adjourn?
I just wanted to follow up on the food service thing, just if we can get that by like July, I guess. Like cost over years and comparisons after the community eligibility grant and all that stuff.
Okay. Mr. Barton, you got that, I guess?
Mr. Arredondo, if you don't mind, would you email some of your specific questions? Food Service has already reached out to me. They're trying to frame and understand your request better.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll send it to you, the superintendent, and President McLaughlin.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right.
I move that we adjourn.
I'll second.
Okay, motion by Hanson, second by Arredondo. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right.
All right, y'all have a nice evening.
Take care.